Hi, my name is Aaron Yates. We're going to show you guys how to use the rental equipment today that you might have when you rent some audio equipment from us. So to explain the pieces that we have here on the table, this is our mixer box and mixer case. There's a couple components inside here. This is the piece that you'd put maybe on a table somewhere centralized between the two speakers where you have them set up. This is also where you're going to plug everything in, all of your audio sources like microphones or iPads or iPods, things like that. So we have this, everything's contained in this box. Right here we have one of the two speakers. These are exactly the same. So this is a 15-inch PV speaker, a PA speaker. It has a couple of inputs on the back that we'll flip it around and show you here in a little bit. These two speakers are the same, so I'm going to show you how to hook it up to one, and then towards the end we'll show you how to hook up the second one. In addition to those things, you're going to have several cables. There's a lot of cables whenever you deal with audio. So some of the cables and some of the terminology, just to start with, this is an XLR cable. XLR cables have these little three prongs on one end. This is the female connector for the XLR cable. And in this case, on the other end, we have a 1/4-inch mono jack. So in this one, it goes from a 1/4-inch mono to XLR female. This is going to plug into this speaker here eventually. The 1/4-inch mono is going to plug into our mixer board, which we'll show you here in just a second. The other type of cable that you'll have, this is an XLR to XLR cable. So both ends are XLR. You can see just like the other one, this is an XLR female, this is the XLR male. These plug in together. They only go one direction. You'll see there's three little prongs in here and three little holes in here. So when they go together, you don't force them. You can kind of feel that they're going in correctly, and then they just kind of snap together like that. That'll be the same connection in the back of the speaker, and this will plug into another XLR cable here in a moment. The last little piece of cabling, this is an XLR splitter. So same thing, same XLR cables with the little three holes here on the male end and the three little prongs here on the female ends. In this case, we have two females and one male. And the reason we do this, we use a splitter so that you can put the speakers further apart if you need to, depending on your setup. So basically what we'll have is an XLR cable coming out of the mixer box into this splitter, and then one end of the splitter will go into the first speaker. Then you'll take the other end, plug it into another XLR cable, and it'll go and plug into a second speaker down the way. So we'll get into the details on that here in a little bit. But let's unbox this mixer board box and see what we have inside here. Okay, so we're going to unbox this mixer case here. This is a gator case. There's a case on the top. This piece comes off of the top, and then there's those two ends kind of look the same. There's one end that comes off of this way and one end that comes off this way. So these little clips, you just have to pull out the little wing and unscrew them, and those will come apart. Same thing on this side. So when you have that off, this just lifts off and you can just store this somewhere. I usually put it under my table. So we'll put that under there. Same thing on the front. This has two wings. So we'll undo the wings here, take this off, and we'll undo the wings here and take this off. Now on the front of this case here, we have a couple of components. The bottom component is an XLR recorder, which you most likely will not be using. It just is in this box for storage, and for the few customers that do need to use this, we'll have a separate video about how to use that component. This component here on the top is the wireless receiver. In the box we have a wireless Shure microphone. It transmits, and this component here receives that transmission, and this component will plug into our mixer board, which then is connected to the speakers, and that's how we can hear everything that goes on with the wireless mic. In the back, mainly we have the power connections here, and also a couple more XLR connections to connect the wireless component to the mixer board here at the top. So in the top of the box, this is a mixer board. This is a small little Yamaha audio mixer, analog audio mixer. Basically what we have here is a row of XLR connections on the top, some other 1/4-inch connections here on the right hand side. We're going to be plugging in our microphone to one of these XLR connectors. Your iPod or whatever other kind of device you're using to make music will plug into some of these 1/4-inch connectors. We'll show you how to do that. The speaker output is over here. It says stereo out. There's a left and right. We run everything mono with rental gear, which means we're only going to be using one side of the stereo channel. So we'll plug in a 1/4 inch XLR connector here, and we'll run this to the speakers and the splitters that I mentioned before. We'll be going over that in detail in just a minute. What I like to do is just kind of set the mixer board up here so that it's, you kind of have a real good view of it. If you're going to be from the back of the table using it this way, it kind of gets it up so that all the cables are real easily seen and put together and nothing gets crimped. Inside the mixer box, which I'll try to tilt up here, you'll see there's a hole that goes underneath. That hole is nice to be able to run cables through there and keep everything nice and neat. So the one cable that's already sticking out, this is the power connector for the mixer. So the first thing we'll do is just take this power connector. You'll see it's grooved on the top. We want that groove to go towards the top of the mixer. And kind of just twist it around until it fits in here. There we go. Once it fits in, it has a little screw so you can screw it in so it won't accidentally become unplugged. So we'll kind of set that up like so. You'll kind of want to pull out these wires and power connectors in the back just to make it easier to see what's what. We've supplied you with kind of a multiple outlet small extension cord, so you can plug this cord into a power source. So we're going to plug in the different components that we need to plug in. Kind of pull all these out. These red and yellow cables are actually XLR cables that are from the wireless receiver that's inside. That's for your wireless microphone. We'll get to those in a minute. Okay. And kind of get this crow's nest undone here. This power supply here that has Yamaha on it, this is the Yamaha audio mixer, so we'll need it to have power. Got it plugged in. There's a power switch here on the back top of the audio mixer. We'll click it to the on position, and the LED power indicator light comes on to show that we do indeed have power there. And the other thing we need to make sure that's plugged in is the receiver for the wireless microphone, so we'll plug it in also. And you'll see there's lights on the front of this receiver that show the different channels. When those lights come on, that means you know you have power there too. So once I kind of have everything plugged in, I just stow these power supplies back inside here as neatly as possible. We'll leave those like that for now. Next thing we want to do is plug in the wireless microphone receiver into the audio mixer here. So in the front, there's actually two receivers because with this system, there's actually a wireless handheld microphone and there's a wireless lapel microphone, kind of like the one that I'm wearing. You can use either or both of those. We're going to plug them in using both, and then we'll show you how to test and use just one at a time. So you'll have the option of using one or the other or both. So these are the two XLR cords that come out of the wireless receiver. What we want to do is bring those up and plug those in under mic 1 and mic 2 of the audio mixer here. And it doesn't matter which is which, they're the same connections. XLR connectors again only go one way, so you kind of have to feel around. You can look at how the connections are and see the holes, and you'll know which way they go in. So I've got those plugged into mic 1 and mic 2 on the audio mixer. Now to test that out, what you can do is use these level indicators down here at the bottom and actually speak into the microphone, and if you see that there's levels in the level indicator, then you know you have a good connection between the wireless microphone and the audio mixer board. So we hold this button down for just a second to turn on the wireless microphone. It has a green power indicator light. what we do then, this is the audio mixer here. Each of these vertical rows is one channel of audio. So these white knobs at the bottom are the volume control for whatever's plugged in up here at the top. So we have a yellow cord and red cord plugged into 1 and 2. If we just turn the audio up pretty high on both of those, and then turn our stereo volume all the way up, this is the main output volume for the whole board. Then when we talk into the microphone, I can see little yellow lights start to come up here on the side. We'll get a closer shot of this later, but because I can speak into this and see that I have volume here, we know that this is hooked up properly. So for now, to save battery, we'll just push the button, turn off the wireless microphone for now and put it back. Next thing we want to do is hook up one of the speakers. So to do that, we're going to use the 1/4 inch to XLR cable. That would be this cable here, one end 1/4 inch mono connector, the other XLR connector. So I'll kind of just undo this cable tie. We're going to take the 1/4 inch jack and we're going to look for the 2 different holes that say stereo out. There's stereo out left and right. We're going to plug it into either one, it doesn't matter, because we're going to be running everything in mono instead of stereo. That's kind of the way that most people work when they're doing live audio. So we're going to plug in a 1/4 inch jack, just kind of snaps in right there to the stereo out. I have it into the left channel there. You can put it in either one, doesn't matter. The other end of the cable, I'm going to kind of just hide it neatly down this side, unroll it. Incidentally, with these cables, you always want to be real careful not to crimp the cables. You know, just like a water hose, when you spin it around and you get a crimp in it, water stops flowing out. If these things get crimped, they can cause breakage in the lines here, and then you have a bad cable, and then you're in bad shape for your event. So you always want to just try not to step on them, try not to drop them, try not to twist them too hard or crimp them in any way. So the other end, this is the XLR cable. I'm going to spin the speaker around so we can see it better. So on the back end of this PV speaker here, we have a couple of knobs and a couple of different connections. This one on the far left is an XLR connection, and it's just the opposite of this one that we have here. So this is where it's going to plug in. Again, XLRs only go in one direction, so we kind of just push it in and it becomes nice and snug right in there. And now on the back of this speaker, it has level control that controls the power that the amplifier is providing to the speaker. It's kind of like an input level for this connection. There's channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3. We've plugged into channel 1, so we're going to use this channel 1 knob and we're going to turn it up to about number 5 to start with. Depending on what type of event you're running, later on you may want to turn this up. If you need more volume and more power, you can turn this one up. It's never, with audio equipment, it's never a good idea to turn things all the way to their maximums. So, you know, to kind of avoid distortion and things like that. So if you turn it to about number 8, that's probably about the highest power outputs you want to get to have good clean sound. Since we're in here in this small little room for right now, I'm going to put it about number 4 or number 5, leave it there for this demonstration. The next thing, we're going to grab a power cord for this speaker. The power connector is here. It's a standard power connector, the same kind that you kind of plug into the back of your computers and other electronic devices. There's also a power switch here. If the 0 is pushed in, that means no power. When you flip it over this way, that means power on. So when you plug it in, you always want to have power off. Then we'll grab a power connector and plug this one in. Okay, so this is the power cord for this PV speaker. The power cords look like this on each end. Of course, one is where you plug into the power source. This one here plugs into the back of the speaker. It's kind of like that female power connection, just like the one you might have in the back of your computer or other electronic devices. So what we're going to do is just line this up with this hole, plug it in there. We're going to bring this other end and plug it into a power source. Okay, now that that's plugged in, the way we power the speaker on is by clicking this button over to the 1 side. You'll hear a little bitty hum as it starts up. That's normal, nothing to be worried about. I'm going to turn this about like this way. So right now we basically have everything hooked up to be able to use the wireless microphone. So what we can do to test it, again, I'm just going to turn the wireless microphone on by pushing the power button momentarily. The green indicator light comes on, and now you can already hear that this speaker is hooked up and working. The way we control the volume and the output from this speaker is on the mixer board. You'll remember we plugged in two microphones over here. I don't need to be using that, I'm sure you can hear me. We plugged in two microphones, there's a yellow and a red. The way you tell the difference between them, if you turn one of them all the way down, so I'll turn channel 2 on this mixer. These are the volume controls for the mixer board here. Channel 1 and channel 2, they're labeled underneath. So I'm going to turn channel 2 all the way down and leave number 1 turned up. And if I test in here, nothing's coming out of that speaker. So I know this is not channel 1. I'll turn it back down. If I turn channel 2 up, now I can hear. So I know channel 2, my red cord, is the handheld wireless device. So the lapel wireless mic is going to be on channel 1 for this demonstration. If these happen to be swapped, this is the way you can still figure it out. Sometimes when people rent this stuff, the yellow and red might get switched. So I'm showing you how to go through it to figure out which is which without relying completely on making sure that everybody else hooked up something properly. So we'll turn that back down. Some people like to put a little piece of masking tape or something on here near the bottom or kind of up here at the top, and they can put just a strip across here and remind themselves what's hooked up where. So you might put a piece of masking tape here and for channel 1 say handheld lapel or wireless lapel mic, and for channel 2 you might say handheld mic, just to keep track of things. So those are both hooked up. Again, to save power when you're not using the handheld mic, you want to just push the power button again momentarily. That'll turn that back off. So now we're going to grab a phone or an iPod or something like that to show you how to hook up those devices into the mixer board. Okay, so to connect a phone or an iPod or iPad or any other kind of device that has a headphone jack output, a lot of times we want to plug that into these mixers here to be able to use those. The way we do that is one of two different ways. This is one of the cords you might have. This is on one end is just a headphone jack. On the other end is what we call RCA audio cables. People think of RCAs, they always have the red and white. A lot of times TVs will have a third one for yellow for video. In this case, we're just obviously running audio. Red and white is for each side of the stereo pair. So on the mixer board here, we actually have inputs for RCA connections. So we can pick the first one. You'll see that these are numbered in pairs. There's channel 7 and 8, and then there's channels 9 and 10. So you can use either one of those. I'm going to plug into 7 and 8. Of course, just match the white to the white, the red to the red. We have that plugged in. The other end, I'm going to plug into my headphone jack of my phone for this demonstration. And I'm just playing some Pandora here, so I'll start playing it on my phone. And then when we turn up channel 7 and 8 on the mixer board here, channel 7 and 8's down here, now we can hear the audio starting to come through the speakers there. So you can also adjust things. You can adjust the highs and lows. So if you need more bass, you would adjust the lows by turning one of these two green knobs. There's highs and lows here, so you can turn those up and down if you need more equalization or kind of a little bit better sound. So that's it for hooking up the phone that way. You're just going to control the volume here, and then there's two different volume sets to control. We have each individual channel has its own volume. These are all the white knobs here. So if you remember, we had the wireless handheld mic plugged into number 2, so you'd have it turned up to where it was where you could listen to that real easily. Then for 7 and 8, that's your music one, so you'd have it turned up to where it's comfortable volume. Then over here, we have a stereo output. This is the red knob in the bottom right corner. This is the master volume. So if you turn this up or down, it's going to turn up and down everything else that you have plugged into the board. So this is kind of like if you want higher volume for everything that you're broadcasting, you would turn this up or down. If one thing or the other is too loud or too quiet comparatively, that's when you would turn these knobs up and down. So that's what all the knobs are for. We'll have another close-up on this, go over this in a little more detail. But it looks real, it can be kind of overwhelming to see all the different knobs, but just keeping in mind that it's kind of like just a matrix, every channel has its own set of controls, and that's what all the different knobs are for. So if you think of them one at a time, it's a little bit easier to handle. So that's one way to hook up the phone. Again, that's with just a headphone jack connection with RCA cables on the other side. And that's plugging in directly into the board with no conversions or no other adapters or anything like that. It's a cable that goes straight from one to the other. So you could play it with your phone, if you had an iPod here, or even if you had another little Walkman or CD player or Discman or something like that, you could play CDs. People have even plugged these into, you know, regular old turntables, record players. Anything that has a headphone out, you can plug it right into this board and use it this way. There's one other type of cable that you might have with your rental set. I'm going to grab it and explain how it works. So we just went over one way to connect a phone to the mixer board. Again, anything you want to play through the speakers has to be connected to the mixer board. We showed you how to use the RCA adapters just a minute ago to connect a phone. This time we're going to connect a phone, and this could be an iPod or anything else that has a headphone jack. We're going to plug this into the mixer board using a different type of cable. So this cable that I have here, on one end is a headphone jack, standard headphone jack. On the other end is an XLR cable. So we can take this XLR cable and plug it in to one of these other microphone inputs here. Again, this mixer comes with 4 XLR inputs. We have 2 of them, one of them for the lapel mic, one of them for the handheld mic, and we have 2 additional ones here now. So what I'm going to do is take this XLR cable and plug it into channel number 4. Again, you kind of just spin this around until you can feel it kind of clicking into place. Then you just push it in and it's nice and snug. It makes XLRs are really reliable because they have a really good connection. So the other end of the cable, I can just take and plug into the headphone jack of my phone or iPod. Start playing. I'll start playing some Pandora here. And then on the mixer board, since I have this plugged into this channel here, the 5/6 channel, I can just turn up the volume knob for the 5/6 channel down below. Again, that's the white knob. And as I have it started to turn up, we have audio coming out of here. I'm going to turn the master volume down a little bit and bring channel number 5 and 6 up a little bit to show you that these kind of all work in tandem with one another. The white knob's controlling volume and also the red knob's controlling volume. So when you're ready to use both at the same time, a lot of times you need to talk over the music while it's playing. Again, you can just push the power button to turn on the handheld mic. I have it turned up here on channel 2, and now I can just talk, and now the music is playing and we're having audio come out from the phone at the same time. So that's the reason, that's really the main purpose for an audio mixer like this, is to be able to have several channels, several input channels, be able to use them simultaneously, and be able to switch back and forth between different audio sources. So anytime that you're going to be using a microphone or 2 microphones along with a music track or anything else that's plugged into a headphone jack, that's the main purpose for the audio mixer, to keep control of all those different channels of audio separately. So that's it for hooking up the mixer board. There will be certain occasions where you might use more or less than what we have shown you here today. In that case, if you have questions, you're welcome to call us or email us with the numbers that we'll present to you on the screen here now. And just tell us what your specific application is, and we can tell you if this mixer board will work or if we need to upgrade you to a bigger soundboard, and we can accommodate you with whatever you need. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you in a little more detail how to hook up the speaker portion, including how to hook up, set up the stands and support the speakers. So hang loose and we'll get set up for that. Okay, so we've turned the table over to the side a little bit here so we have more room to show you how these speaker stands work and how they're going to go and sit up on top of these. These speaker stands are really strong units. They can hold up to a couple 100 pounds apiece. These speakers are nowhere near that heavy, so it's going to be in good shape to be able to hold your speaker for you safely as long as you set this stand up safely. So there's 2 different types of stands that you might get with your rental unit. I'm going to show you how to use both of them. This is the first one here. Both of these are made by Ultimate. They work a little bit differently. So to show you how these work, there's these little twisty knobs here that tighten and loosen. First thing we're going to do is loosen both sets of the knobs here, and then we're basically just going to take these legs and start extending them out. And they'll only go one way. So a lot of times people struggle because they're trying to figure out why they won't twist that way. You kind of just have to figure out the right way, and then when you have it, it'll go real smoothly, and they'll start pushing down like this. So it might be out of the frame at the bottom, but you want to have a good wide base. So you want to push this down maybe 3/4 down the stand or so, The further you push it down, the kind of the wider those legs get, and then you'll feel where it kind of gets to the maximum, I guess, diameter of the three legs in the triangle. When you get there, you want to go ahead and tighten this down. You don't have to go super duper tight. You know, you just want to go maybe a quarter turn past where it catches, because it really doesn't catch that much weight. The way that it's designed, it doesn't have to be super duper tight to hold the weight. So when that's there, this other knob that tightens and loosens is for this piece here that goes up and down. So you know, it's always safer to keep the speakers lower because it's a lower center of gravity, less likely to tip over. But if you have somewhere really safe that you're not worried about people walking by and things like that, you can lift this speaker stand up, tighten this knob here, and then of course the speaker is going to sit up a lot higher. So I'm going to put it down though for demonstration purposes here. The other thing about these stands, there's a little telescoping rod here. And you can see these little buttons, there's buttons on each side like this that are spring loaded. When you push both of those in and you pull up on this top piece, that's a separate piece, it'll snap in up here like this. This is actually the size that fits perfectly in the hole in the bottom of this speaker. So I always like to travel with it down because it's less likely to damage it. But then when you're ready to set the speakers up, push those in, snap them into the two top holes. Kind of always push down to make sure everything's set up just right. Everything looks good. So we're going to take this speaker, which right now, by the way, has nothing plugged into the back of it. I don't like to put them up on stands while anything's plugged in because you have a tendency to trip over cords and things like that. So for safety, you want to put these on the stands when there's nothing plugged into the back of the speaker. So the way we do it, you know, if you have back problems or anything like that, you probably don't want to lift this. These are maybe only about 30 pounds, but when you start lifting them up over close to the top of your head, it can be, you know, a little strain on your back. So you want to be real careful. But there's handles on each side. You can just kind of grip each one like this. What I do is just kind of pick it up and put it over the top of the stand. Then you can just kind of move it around, excuse me, until you find the hole, just like so. I'm going to move it over just a bit. So you'll see when you get it up, there's a little hole in the bottom. This is really a lot easier to do with two people if you haven't done it a lot. But you can find the little hole in the bottom, and then the speaker sits up on top. And it rotates real easily, so you can aim it wherever you need to go. It's real light at this point. You know, I can do this with just one finger. So they're really well balanced. They feel like they're a little bit wobbly when you touch them. It's just kind of the way they're designed to be able to accommodate a couple different size rods that you can stick these on. As long as these are in some place where not a lot of people are going to be moving around and touching them a lot, then they'll be in good shape. So you just kind of keep that in mind when you're finding a spot for these speakers. Now that we have it up on the stand, we're going to go over again the cables that connect to the back of this, and we're going to show you how to connect more than one speaker so that you can run a pair or multiple speakers to different locations in the room. Okay, so now we have the speaker safely up on this stand here. Like we showed you, it feels a little bit wobbly sometimes, but it really takes a whole lot to push these things over, so they're going to be pretty safe. Still, you just want to keep the kids away from there. Don't put these in a high traffic area. You don't want people walking by these all the time and touching them and you know, doing things like that just for safety. So again, on the back, we're just going to show you how these cables hook up to this. This is going to be, we're going to hook it up as we would to two different speakers. So the way we do that, again, if you remember from the mixer, we have a cable that comes out of the stereo output of the mixer. The other end of that cable is an XLR connector, like this one. If we take that, the first thing we're going to do is get this splitter. If you remember, this is an XLR splitter that has the male end like this and two female ends like this. So what we're going to do is place this splitter into the end of the line that comes directly from the mixer. So when we plug that in, it kind of snaps in there real nice and snug. So now basically we've just taken one end and made two ends. So the first end we're going to plug into the speaker here. The other end we're going to plug into another XLR cable. So let me unwrap this one. Okay, so we have a regular XLR cable there. I have the male end. I'm going to plug it. It doesn't matter which one, but I'm going to plug the male end of the other cable into one side of the splitter. And the other side of the splitter I'm going to plug directly into this speaker here. So that's our audio source. We also have a power connector. I've got the power cable plugged into an extension cord, and then this end, the power connector, we're going to plug into the speaker. Once we have that plugged in, we can go ahead and turn the power on. There's a little power switch right underneath the amplifier. So we can turn that on, and again in here I have the amplifier turned up to about number 4. It goes all the way to 10. I wouldn't go any more than about number 8 to keep the signal being clean and good quality audio. So because we're in here and we're in a small space, I'm going to leave it at number 4. These can tend to get pretty loud. So that's one speaker. If you had that one set up and that was all you needed, if you were to turn up the volume, again we can hear Pandora playing through here now. So the first speaker is plugged in. If we were just running one speaker, we'd be done now. But if we're going to have speaker number 2, if you remember, we had an XLR splitter that we plugged in the male end of the XLR cable into one side of this one. So the other end here is another XLR end like so. So on the second speaker that we could have across the room or across the yard or wherever we're using it, we can run this cable to that second speaker, and we just plug in that XLR cable directly into input number 1, just like we did with this speaker. Again, everything else works the same. The power on that second speaker is the same. The little knobs that control the output of power are the same. Generally, you try to keep these matched. So if you have this one on 4 power, you want the other one on number 4 power. If you turn one of them up to 6 or 7, you want to turn the other one up to 6 or 7 to keep them approximately equal. So that's basically it for the overview of how to connect everything for your rental system. We'll do a couple more little close-ups to get you a little more comfortable with how to use that mixer board. That's all for this section. Okay, so just a little more detail about the mixer board now that we've been through all the connections to get all of your equipment set up. I like to use the mixer board on top of the mixer box, just like this. Sometimes if you want to put something underneath the back of it to prop it up a little bit so you can see it better, that's fine. But this way, this kind of keeps it protected. There's this real nice soft fur inside here that kind of keeps it from getting banged up and scratched up. So it's good practice to leave it inside here. It also gives you a place to store some of your other accessories. If you have your wireless microphone, you can store it inside there. You can store your phone that's playing the music inside there, and kind of keeps everything in one place, real concise. Just want to go over a little bit more about the board and how the connections work. Beginning up here at the top, you remember we plugged in XLR cables into our mic sections up here. There's 4 microphone inputs that are XLR inputs. Remember, XLR are the ones that have the 3 little connectors that are kind of in a little tube, metal tube that you just plug right in. If we want to take them out, you just pull slightly on the XLR cable and it comes right out real nice and clean. To plug it in, you just line up the holes and just push a little bit. Doesn't take much push at all, and it fits in there nice and snug. Same thing for these others. You can just a light touch and you can really feel it snap into place. The way that these work here, say for our red microphone here, number 2, is actually this handheld microphone here. So when I turn the volume up, and speak into the microphone, I can hear it coming out of the main speakers. If there's things I want to do to adjust that microphone, there's a couple different ways and things we need to do. Starting at the very bottom, this is the volume control. When you turn the white dials to the right, that increases volume, to the left, decreases volume. Moving up, this next one, the red one, is a pan control. You won't be using that because right now we're hooked up in a mono system, meaning we don't have like stereo pairs left and right. Pan, if we did have stereo pair hooked up, panning would be assigning it to the left channel or assigning it to the right channel individually. Moving on up, the blue one is an auxiliary control. Again, you won't be using that unless you have hooked up, they're for things like monitors for a band that's playing and they have a little speaker pointed at them on stage so they can hear themselves better. That's what the auxiliary controls are for. So most people won't be using the auxiliary controls. The next 3 though, the 3 different green knobs here, this is the equalizer section, the EQ. And so with most of these channels we have a low, mid, and a high. So lows are like adjusting the bass. So if you turn the lows up by turning them to the right, you're going to have a deeper sound, the lower end of the frequency spectrum. So most people, the audio professionals tell you, you very rarely ever boost an equalizer signal. Usually you want to cut certain equalizer signals to equal them out. So if a guy has a really deep booming voice, you might end up cutting some of the lows by twisting the knob a little bit to the left to make it sound a little bit better through the main speakers. So again, most of the time with the EQ, most of the time we're cutting, we're going to the left. We're very rarely going to the right to increase different channels. At least that's how the professionals like to do it. Moving on up, there's different knobs up here. These two yellow knobs are for compression. If you have a lot of different people using the same microphone and some of them talk really loudly and some of them talk really, really quietly, sometimes it's a good idea to turn this knob up towards the middle. This is just a real simple compression knob. And so if you put this towards the middle, it kind of equalizes out the people that are really loud and the people that are really quiet. Kind of helps you from having to twist this knob back and forth all the time every time somebody else gets the mic. Moving on up a little bit further, the gain controls for these first 4 channels here. Gain is like the volume as it's coming into the input up here at the top. People get confused sometimes between whether or not to adjust the gain or whether or not to adjust the volume down here at the bottom. Most of the time with the gain here, we kind of just leave it somewhere in the middle. The only time we would adjust this is if you're turning up your microphone volume all the way up to the right and you're still not getting it loud enough or you still can't hear it very well, you can start by easing up the gain knob here towards the right. That's going to boost the signal as it comes into the mixer board. If you have feedback and things that are coming in, you know, a loud screaming noise coming through the speakers, usually that's because the gain's turned up too high. So if you have a lot of feedback, you can start by turning the gain down a little bit up here. That's the first thing to check. If you still have a lot of feedback, you want to make sure that when you're using the microphone, they're not right in front of one of the speakers. Because if you take this microphone and put it around to the other side and started using it up there, you would start to get a lot of feedback. So if you kind of keep the microphone behind the speakers for the most part, or at least away from right in front of them, then you'll be okay with feedback. So those controls are the same across all the different channels. The only difference, like if you have something plugged into the 7/8 pair or the 9/10 pair, you'll notice you don't have a mid control in the equalizer section. You just have lows and highs. But those are everything else works exactly the same for all the different rows here. And you know which one you're controlling because they're numbered here at the bottom and they're numbered also right here along the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Same labels down here across the bottom. Those labels correspond to the different inputs up here at the top. So if you have the other type of phone input cable up here and you have it into 7 and 8 on the RCAs, then you know you're using 7 and 8 right here to control the volume and pitch. If you're using the XLR from the phone, like we've showed you, and you have it plugged into the 5/6 pair, then you know you're going to be using the 5/6 row here to adjust the volume and the other things there. So there's Pandora still playing through at that channel. Moving over to the right, this cable here we have plugged in, it's going directly to our first speaker and into that XLR splitter that we explained. This is the main speaker output, and you can hear when I unplugged it, it popped really loud. It's always a good idea to turn your speaker off before you pull this plug in or out. So if we wanted to be hooking these up, we'd probably just turn the power off there so we don't get big loud pops. But this 1/4" cable plugs into either hole underneath the label stereo out. That's how we get signal to our speakers. Then we turn our speaker back on. It's okay that it does pop just a little bit. If we still have Pandora playing and we turn up the appropriate channel, we can hear it start playing out of the speaker there. So I'll show you just one other thing real quick. Again, this is the connection that goes from a phone or an iPod into the mixer board. On one end we have a standard headphone jack that plugs into the headphone jack on the phone or iPod. You can start playing your playlist or whatever it is, Pandora or whatever you have going on there. The other end is the XLR cable that plugs into one of the XLR inputs at the top. So I plugged it into 5/6, so I use 5/6 to control the volume down here. The other type of cable we can use to plug in a phone or an iPod is a headphone jack to RCA cables. Again, headphone jack to RCA cables. What we can do here is just pick a channel up here at the top. You'll see the little red and white connectors up here. We'll see that there's one that's labeled 7/8. So we can just plug in the white one to the white one, the red one to the red one on 7/8 channel. Take the other end of that cord, and plug it into our phone and start playing. And in this case, since it's plugged into 7 and 8, we would turn up the 7 and 8 knob here. And then we have sound out of the speakers from the phone again. So that's how this works. If you have any questions or you have a specific application that we haven't covered and given you instructions for, feel free to contact us anytime. We'll have our email addresses and cell phone numbers on the screen now. If you have a problem while you're renting the equipment and just need some quick help, you can either take this video with you and refer to it, or you can contact us at those numbers as well. Thank you.